Then we started dating, and it was the most horrific dating experience I've ever had. Like, to the point where he was saying one thing, like God has showed him that I'm going to be his wife, but then showing me the opposite, that he's completely not interested in me. Hi, me again. So as you know, yesterday's video was part 1, and today we are on part 2. So today's video is about the 3 things that we can learn from Saul's confirmation that we can then take on board in our own life when we are waiting for God to confirm something. Guys, my name is Krupa and I create faith-based content here on YouTube. If you're returning, thank you so much for being here, and if you are new, thank you too for being here, and hi. So feel free to subscribe if faith-based content seems like something you are into. So number 1 is going to be the most obvious, and it's that God is of clarity. Now, let me give you a story time. There was this guy. Well, I had been praying for a husband, and then this guy comes into my life and says that God has told him that I'm going to be his wife. I've told you this story before, but it's got so much depth to it that I probably keep on telling this story even to my children one day. But I didn't take it to the Lord. I just thought, oh yeah, an answer to my prayer, because God has confirmed it via this guy. Then we started dating, and it was the most horrific dating experience I've ever had. Like, to the point where he was saying one thing, like God has showed him that I'm going to be his wife, but then showing me the opposite, that he's completely not interested in me. So I was just like so confused, because in one sense it's like clarity, a false sense of clarity, because I didn't seek God for clarity in that. But then in another sense, it's so confusing. In that same breath, actually, the current business that I'm working on, I actually had to ask the Lord, like, is this a vision from you? Because it's a big vision, it's a God vision. And he confirmed it in so many ways that there was no room for confusion. And that is the God that we serve. Like, if you feel like God has confirmed something and then you're feeling confused by it, by the next second or by the series of events that follow, go back to the drawing board and ask God, or the prayer room in this case. Go back to that place, go back to your room and ask God, like, give me clarity on this, because I'm not completely sold on it. And the reason being is because God won't tell us something, God won't do something, God won't tell us to do something if it's not aligned to his character. And his character is not confusing. He's not here one second and there one second and tossed by the wind like we sometimes are. He is very clear, very concise, very much decisive. So if he says this is where I want you to be, and if he says this is my calling upon your life and this is my purpose upon your life, he's not going to be like, oh, actually, oh, I made a mistake. I told you to be a musician, but actually what I really meant was that you're going to be an accountant. That's what I meant. I got the M's mixed up. I meant maths, accountant, not musician. Like, he's not going to be tossing you around here and there and there and here. It's going to be very clear, very concise, just as it was for Saul. He wasn't being confused even by the smallest of nuances. Like, he wasn't being confused over being a commander of the people versus the priest of the people. Despite the fact that the Lord said, you're going to prophesy, by the way, I'm going to change your heart, which, by the way, we'll get to. But despite the changes in his like character, in his giftings, he still wasn't confused between commander of his people versus priest of his people, which very well could have been the situation. He could have merged the two. There could have been confusion, but there wasn't. God's confirmation gave him clarity. So that is point number 1, that when you're asking God for confirmation, it has to come with clarity. And if it's not coming with clarity, it's coming with confusion, in which case, my sister, go back to the prayer room and ask the Father, what is it that you want me to do? And make it very clear. If this is a yes, go this way, or no, stay where you are. Make sense? Makes sense. The second thing that we can learn through Saul's confirmation is that God will always remain in the seat of being your rock, your sustainer, your provider. This confirmation was so strongly towards this calling that no matter what happens in the future, no matter what happens in the journey of his calling, the highs and the lows, the rockies and the smooths, like no matter what happens, and as we read and as we know of Saul's life, later on it turns sour. No matter what happens, he will never be in a place of doubt. He will always know that the Lord definitely called him to do this. Because sis, even when it comes to marriage, for example, marriage is no easy feat. Oh my days. It takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes awareness of your own shortcomings, which is never an easy thing to do. We all struggle with pride. Let's not lie to ourselves. We all struggle with pride. We all struggle to see ourselves in the light that others might see us. And when I say others, I mean others that are close enough to see our ugly. So I say that to say, God's confirmation will always be so strong in your life. It will never be willy-nilly, here nor there, kind of empty, kind of not. No, it will be very black and white, very strong, very clear, as my previous point, because God has to always remain in the seat of being your rock. God's calling will never be one of those things where it's like, you are complete now. This is the only thing that you are living for. Like, now that you're a commander, Saul, you don't need me. No, you're a complete human being. You have reached the epitome of humanity. Like, no. God's calling will be so clear that you will never be able to fall into doubt whether or not it was him. It's never going to be a thing where it's like, oh, maybe I didn't hear the Lord well. Maybe it was just me, and therefore I need to go back a few steps now and correct myself. Like, no. God's confirmation will be so clear that yes, you are to marry this guy, or yes, you are to go to this job. And then when things hit the fan and sometimes you experience lows in that calling, because hello, we all do, then you will know that it's not for you to take steps back or to now ask God for a different calling. It's for you to stick with it and know that he is your rock in that. Do you know what I mean? To refine you, to ensure that he's chipping away things that are no longer serving you and no longer reflecting Christ through you. Do you know what I mean? And so I say that to say Saul's confirmation was so point blank, so clear and concise that even in his later years when, events start to turn sour, he's never going to be like, oh, let me go back a few steps because maybe I didn't hear God well. Maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. Maybe I made this thing up in my head and therefore I don't really need to go through these trials. I need to just ask God for a different calling. Like, no. This is what God has confirmed, and this shall be despite the highs and the lows, despite how you feel in those moments. Do you know what I mean? And that then leads you to definitely position God in a way in your life that he remains the rock, he remains the sustainer, he remains the provider, he remains your shelter, he remains your fortress. Point number 3 is actually my favorite because this completely kills imposter syndrome, which sometimes I deal with. And it's this. In verse 9 it says, so it was when he had turned his back to go from Samuel that God gave him another heart, and all those signs came to pass that day. I love that. When God confirms that this is it for you, you will either already hold the character for the role. Like David, for example, he was a shepherd. He was already in training, not knowing what the training was actually for. And he was protecting his sheep. Therefore, he knew how to aim very well to kill Goliath, to ensure that he now puts himself on the map. Do you know what I mean? Or God puts him on the map via those skills that he acquired. So I say that to say you either already are in the works of building that characteristic that you need for the calling that God is going to confirm in your life. But also, once God does confirm the next steps for you, or the calling, or whatever it is that you are waiting for the confirmation for, he's going to give you the characteristics and the heart that you need for that role. So, for example, with this whole business idea that I'm doing, and by the way, I know it's getting annoying that you don't know what the business idea is and I keep talking about it, but very soon, hopefully, I can let you know. But I say that to say, because this was a big God idea, I was like, God, but I don't have time. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And best believe, in one way, shape, or form, I started to fall into those things that I did not have. Do you know what I mean? I started to manage my time well, that I could do all those things. We got incredible support in the time that I was recording the stuff. I can't say it, you know. But we got incredible support in the very first batch of intense work for the business. I say all of that to say, when God confirms that this is definitely the way he wants you to go, from my life alone and from Saul's life too, I can see that God gives us all the characteristics that we need to be in that calling, whether that's now or whether that's learned gradually as time goes on. But you will always find that you are in preparation for something, or that you have received the preparation for that thing. Does that make sense? We see from Saul's life that God gave him another heart. He gave him another drive, another passion. He gave him a new gifting to prophesy with the other prophets, to the point where people are like, well, hold on a minute, isn't this guy the son of Kish? I didn't know he's one of the prophets. I didn't know he prophesies. God made his life a testimony to his glory. But God will use your testimony to testify of his glory, of his mightiness, basically. And so I say that to say, when it comes to the calling that God has over your life, trust that God will provide everything. So that will be my last point. Of course, it's not the only thing. And so in the comment section down below, let me see what God has done in your life to confirm a particular thing. You don't need to go into details if you don't want to, because I know other people are reading it too, but help us to just glean from each other. And that being said, I'm going to leave this video right over here. Watch my other videos if you enjoyed this one, and I shall see you in the comment section down below, but I shall also see you in the next video. Bye.